Okay, so today I know I've uh, I've been talking about Kermit Gosnell and the House of Horrors that was at 3801 Lancaster. His obituary, which he used to murder hundreds, if not thousands. It's not clear how many children he killed. He deliberately murdered in that abortion factory. But I know I've been talking about him recently, and the film and the book based on his really disturbing life. It's I don't know if you can see it, but Kermit Gosnell. It's called Gosnell: The Untold Story of America's Most Prolific Serial Killer. And I would suggest everyone who can't see the movie. It's still playing in theaters, so I would try to find a theater within close proximity that plays it. That's very difficult because they've been shutting it down all over the country, despite relatively high grossing. The fact that it's a high grossing film, but I would just urge everyone to see the film, or if they can't see the film, acquire the book because it's really just an astonishing, horrifying story. But one of the things that hasn't been even um, in conservative news media, which has covered this extensively and much better than mainstream media. Even one part of his story that's been overlooked to a large extent is the the way he became a doctor, which is a fascinating and disturbing story in and of itself. He went to the University of UPenn and transferred out. That was an Ivy League school. He transferred out to a historically black, an um, HBCU, a historically black college and university called Dickinson, in order to in order to essentially game the system, because only um, uh, students at this college were selected in much greater number, proportionally, than uh, than students who went to an Ivy League school. They were for the medical school he wanted to attend. So basically, he rigged the system, realizing that he was not that bright, and that's one of the things you understand when you read his book. I mean, this was a guy who was not even an OBGYN, was not even an obstetrician or gynecologist, and yet he was working with female patients and the female anatomy, and in this case, murdering sometimes unwilling women who didn't want to have abortions performed on their children. He was working with these women without being an OBGYN. So he was not that bright. He was not that talented or skilled, despite the fact, like most serial killers, he thought he was much brighter than everyone else. It was really more of a case of just uh, lazy, incompetent, and sometimes complicit bureaucrats who were following orders not to impede someone who was murdering children, because abortion is sacrosanct in this country that we live in. So, I mean, he was not that bright, uh, and you learn that once you read more about him. So he was kind of a dumb guy. So of course he needed to utilize his race, his his skin color, in order to take advantage of this weird anti-constitutional, unconstitutional loophole that allowed him to benefit from his race, to be promoted, and to be have benefits conferred upon him by virtue of the fact that he was African American. And this is something that when you see stories in the news like the Asian American students who are blatantly discriminated against at Harvard University, who filed a lawsuit where their personalities, they're racially profiled, and this is one of the hilarious ironies and hypocrisies of the left. They will adamantly say you can't racially or ethnically profile. You can't, if, despite the fact that Muslims are much more likely to hijack a plane or to commit terrorism, you're not allowed to profile them if you see them at the airport during airline screening. You can't profile people by race, regardless of how often they commit a crime relative to the rest of the population. This is all discriminatory and racist and unconstitutional. But affirmative action and racial preferences and set-asides, which are also blatantly unconstitutional, which violate the Equal Protection Clause, those are perfectly fine because they benefit a group that the left exalts rather than demeans. So, I mean, that's just one issue: the fact that it's blatantly unconstitutional, and the fact that it promotes people who aren't qualified to be in an academic a very high academic setting like the Ivy Leagues, and it discriminates against people who are qualified. It's a complete rejection of meritocracy. But beyond all of that, beyond these very legitimate issues, which would be enough to have affirmative action just scotched, there's also the very real factor that you're putting people's lives in danger, and you're not putting rich or even middle-class white people, their lives in danger. Now, there were some white patients of Kermit Gosnell. There were some white patients and some women whose lives were affected, but they were a small minority. Most of the people he butchered, most of the women he butchered and the babies he killed, they were born to African American and Hispanic and minority women who were minorities. Like Karnamaya Mongar was a Bhutanese refugee living in Nepal who came to this country after living in a refugee camp for decades. So, I mean, this is what really galls me. You're literally putting people's lives in danger, and people's lives have been killed, not just in this case, in the epochal affirmative action case, Baki, where they let another doctor, now he wasn't an abortionist, but so he didn't kill as many people, but deliberately, but the petitioner in Baki was discriminated against because he was white, and the person who was admitted in place of him was a black doctor who wound up killing someone in a botched cosmetic surgery. And progressives never mention that fact when they're bringing this case, or if they do, they kind of elide over the details. But the fact is, affirmative action and racial preferences are murdering people, and most of the people they're murdering are black and brown individuals. So, I mean, the next time you get into an argument with a self-righteous leftist who's just feels so good that they're helping poor black people, remind them that they're probably supporting something that they're supporting something that will, in the end, probably hurt, maim, or kill poor black people and brown people who don't have the advantages that middle class, wealthy black people who are some of the beneficiaries of this policy don't have. They don't have they don't have access to um, the wealth and the resources that that affirmative actions winners do. And the Kermit Gosnell case is a perfect illustration of that.